Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be on this great planet of ours. John Barba, along with Dave Holdorf and Rick Mayo from Takeo Comfort Solutions. And welcome to another edition of Takeo Tuesday. How we
Yes,
doing?
I am well. Welcome back to Takeo Tuesday for the residential section for
Yeah,
2024. We haven't been online for 2024 just yet.
No, we haven't.
So
It's been a
yeah,
busy first few months, so we're glad to be back in action and back in the saddle here. And Dave has an awesome presentation for us today on residential domestic hot water recirculation systems. Why do we do them? Why are they important? And it's the first in a 3 or 4 part series. I believe it's a 3 part series that myself, Dave, and Rick will be doing. Rick will be talking about sizing and making sure you don't overpump, which is a chronic issue. We'll also be talking about the best ways to control a domestic hot water recirculation system. Because Rick, why sizing and control are very important. Why? Why do we have to be concerned about that?
well, we don't want to end up tearing up the system, short term or long term. We There's evidence out there that we run water that's hot, that's chlorinated too fast through the piping system. We start tearing things up, and that's what happens when we just shoot from the hip and throw a pump in there. So we got to do the math, as we like to say at Taco.
That's right. That's right. We have to do the math. And for starters, to get us kicked off, to get this process going, Dave's going to walk us through the benefit of domestic hot water residential recirculation systems, why we want to do them, and some things we need to be cognizant of, and different types of applications. So, Dave, why don't Rick and I mute our microphones? You can go ahead and get started. But actually, before we do that, I just want to make sure first off everyone can hear us. I mean, otherwise we spend 3 minutes with our mouths going wah wah wah. If you
right.
guys go down to the chat section there, just type in a hi, hello, how are you, and let us know where you're from. That way we know you can hear us. So
Yes,
we'll wait
and,
for.
and we do
There
we
they
do
are.
encourage those questions and answers and simple
Yep.
comments during the presentation, just to make sure we're not sitting here talking to ourselves. So we've got a couple guys jumping in here. So Thomas, thank you, and Alan and Bryce,
Mm.
Sammy, Tom,
And
uh,
gals.
yep, and gals, yep.
Yep.
Eric, Chris, John, awesome. Thank you very much, everybody, for jumping in there and letting us know where you're at. Greatly appreciated. So why don't we get this show on the road now, shall we?
Let her
All
rip,
right.
brother.
So just again, John was bringing up that control panel. If you see an orange arrow pointing to the left, whoops. What you want to make sure you do is click on that arrow, make a point to the right. You can expand out. You can adjust your not your microphone, but your speakers. There are no handouts tonight, and you'll see the questions and chat section for us there. So, and I think a whole bunch of people already got that taken care of. So I do greatly appreciate that for us. So I do also want to bring up right now, in 24 hours time from today, you will get a link. All right, you will get an email from us that's going to have a link that, one, you can watch the presentation that we just did, all right, as well as register for next week. And you'll also get your PDH hour certificate as well. So that will be coming in 24 hours time. So, so let's get this show and let's keep on going here. All right, and let's talk about hot water. All right, and one of those things, we do a lot of training classes here at Takeo. We talk about doing the math, making sure that you've got the right flow, and especially in the world of hydronics. But one of those things that happens very often in the world of domestic hot water in your home, yes, we're going to calculate to make sure you got enough of it, okay? But now you end up having to wait for it, all right? And so this is what we want to make sure, and this is what we're going to address today, is to eliminate that weight of hot water in your house, all right? And we're going to find those different ways, and also the ramifications also in waiting for hot water as well. So, so really what we're addressing here, all right, has nothing to do with the size of the water heater or the storage of that water heater that you have there, or even, the tankless design systems out there. What we're looking at here is your typical plumbing system installed in a home. And what ends up happening is this: you see the hot water line coming off your water heater and running in a T and branch, most practical, most common way of installing the plumbing in your home. And we will branch off and hit your different fixtures throughout the house itself. And as we are getting further and further away, what ends up happening is that the water starts to cool off. It just gives off its heat naturally because it's warmer on the inside of the pipe and it's cooler on the outside in that area, surrounding areas. So we lose that water. So now we have to dump all this water out of the line in order to get the water warm again at our fixtures. All right. So that's our biggest problem. All right. Is that, that water cooling down, and now we need to get that hot water again. And when we take a look at really what we're trying to do, and I think this is so important to pay attention to when we start looking at the definition of what domestic hot water recirc systems are. Now, I hate reading from slides, because I know everybody here that is John online with us today can read. All right, but I want to read it just so you can really pick up a few of the things that we're talking about today. All right, a hot water recirculation system is a plumbing system that replaces hot water to the fixtures without draining and wasting that water. Recirculating systems mechanically moves temperature. Remember that, temperature from a water heater to the fixtures themselves. All right, so it has absolutely nothing to do to the gallons per minute that your fixtures can actually flow. All right, has absolutely nothing to do with that. We are just looking to replace the hot water, the temperature that was in those pipes, with warm water from behind it again. All right, so it's not going to be a very large flow rate that we're going to do. And that's going to come really important into the next session when we go into sizing our circulators. All right, so we'll spend a lot of time on that next week, making sure that we have the right size system installed for that application, for that project, for that house. All right, so just remember that. It's not GPM, it's all about temperature that we're trying to move here. All right, so when we start thinking about hot water recirculation, all right, many homes, many years ago, we did not need a lot of hot water recirculation. All right, but construction of homes have changed a lot over the last 50 years. All right, when we start to take a look at what's changed, what's going on, and why is hot water recirc more important today than it ever has been. And then again, most people don't even know that there's an application, there's a way to eliminate that wait for hot water. Okay, so, but as we take a look at history over the last 50 years, the average home size has changed. All right, it's grown double in size in that construction time frame, right? You think about that home in 1970, less than 1,500 square foot house. All right, today's homes were almost a 3,000 square. All right, and also when you stop and think about those homes, how many people lived in that home, right? When you look at that 1970s home, how many people lived in that ranch? All right, yeah, there was probably 5, 6 people in that house, right? There was no time for the water to ever cool down because how many bathrooms were in there? There was one, right? So you end up with that a lot of more usage. The water never had a chance to cool down. Today's home, 2,800 square feet. All right, and think about how many people are in that house today. All right, we end up we're seeing 3, maybe 4. All right, we're not going to have more kids than parents today. Okay, so the size of the home has changed. All right, and therefore with the size of the home that's changed, we're also looking at the distance to those furthest fixtures have also increased. All right, we're looking at that home maximum was like 30 feet. That ranch home that we saw in the 70s was a stack system. You had that water heater, and right above that water heater in the basement space was the kitchen. And the kitchen shared a wall with the 1 bathroom in the house. That was it. That was the amount of runoff pipe that you had. Okay, now we're looking at 80, 90 feet to that furthest fixture. We're putting fixtures wherever we want to in this house. All right, nowadays we're looking to use hot water wherever we want to use it. And then of course, as we start looking, we also look at seeing the number of fixtures are also doubling out there. All right, every place we're putting it into a fixture group, all right, we're doubling up those numbers. For example, I renovated my house about 10 years ago, renovated to studs, new electric, new plumbing, new heat, new insulation, new everything. And as I was running that new outdoor spigot to the front yard, right by the driveway there, mostly for washing cars and whatnot, I pulled out that spigot and I put in a hot cold valve for outside of the driveway. all right, just for those capabilities of being able to wash my car in November and being able to dunk my hand into warm water. Now, granted, it was 10 years ago. I still haven't turned on the hot valve from inside the house to be able to use hot water out in the front yard. All right, actually, I did. I had it on the first year. All right, we had all this construction that happened out there, and somebody decided to water the flowers that I had just planted and didn't realize that they had turned on the hot side of the spigot, and then everything was dead within minutes. All right, but so I did turn it off at that point, but I have that capability to have it there, right? So our number of fixtures have doubled. So what does all that mean? All right, what does all of that mean? Well, when you go ahead and you do the math, it's going to calculate out what we're doing and waiting for hot water. So the higher the fixture count, the more volume of water. All right, which means, all right, we need to have bigger pipe to supply our house. You take a look at that old ranch house from 1970, we had 1/2 inch coming off of that water heater. Today, 3/4 and 1 inch is the norm that's coming off the water heater. And then as we do that T and branch system down throughout the house, then we'll neck down to the smaller pipe size as we get further away. All right, but that 3/4 and 1 inch is more common. And then, all right, we start looking at that having that bigger the pipe, the fixture flow rates have dropped down. All right, we've had mandates to come along with your fixtures, your flow rates coming out of your shower heads have changed. We look at the flow rate of a shower head today. All right, you go down to this, you go put a new shower head in your house. You're looking at 2.5, 2.25 gallons, 2 gallons a minute. All right, and even less is coming down the pike. All right, you take a look at that shower head from 1960, 1970. We're looking at 5, 6 gallons a minute. Right, you turn the shower on, it took skin away. So but now we have regulated fixtures dropping that flow rate down tremendously. So when that flow rate drops down, the velocity of the water drops tremendously as well. So then when you reduce the velocity, increase the distance out to that furthest fixture, when you do the math, we take a look at it, people wait 18 times longer today waiting for hot water than they did in 1970. 18 times longer. All right. And what do they do about it? Absolutely nothing. All right. It's just a given. Hey, this is what we have. For some people, it was a light switch from moving from that 1,200 square foot ranch into a 3,000 square foot home. And they say, well, the house is bigger. I have to wait for water longer, right? And that's it. They don't know there's anything that can be done. So waiting, it can be, is one of the biggest downfalls to waiting for that hot water to get there. But then we start talking about the wasting. All right. So if you wait for hot water, I got a quick question for everybody out there. If you can tell me, how long do you wait for hot water in the morning? How long do you wait? I'm just curious as to a general. We've got a ton of people online with us today. I would love to have a couple of answers out there on how long do you wait for hot water. So Peter says he waits about 2 seconds. All right, so that either one, he's got that 1970s ranch still, or he's got a recirc system installed in his house.
You can always tell the quick ones. They got a recirc and they want you to know about it.
Right. Tom here saying he waits 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, Ahmad, 3 minutes roughly. Wow. Yeah. 5 minutes for Wanda. That's crazy.
All right. Now, what's interesting is that you have to sit there, and I'm sure maybe some of you have, and maybe some of you haven't. All right. And you're estimating that time period, but you'd have to stand there with a stopwatch and put your hand in the shower and wait for it. If you know you wait for hot water, what's your typical routine? You turn the water on and you go do something else. Right? You go do something else. And then you take a look back, and once you see the steam, you're like, okay, time I can jump in now. All right. Tom Fisher says he's got a recirc system in there. Excellent. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things that just is the norm. It might have been hot in 15 seconds, but you came back 3 minutes later. All right. You go and laid out the clothes for the day or whatever. So the average family of 4, and this number comes from the Department of Energy, they say the average family of 4 will waste 32 gallons a day waiting for hot water. All right. Now the morning is that one time of the day. Yes, when that first person jumping in the shower waits a couple of minutes. All right. But then later in the day, you turn on the kitchen sink, you're getting ready for dinner, things like that. There's up to 32 gallons a day for a family of 4. which means it's approximately 12,000 gallons a year. The average homeowner will waste 12,000 gallons a year waiting for hot water. And I was trying to find a pool that was around 12,000 gallons. All right, I found this pool, which is a container. All right, this is a container, off of a truck. All right, and that's showing 9,800 gallons. So just think about that for a second. When you leave work today and you get back on the highway and you drive past a container truck, just imagine that container truck holds 12,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons of water. All right, and that's what the average family of four is wasting every year. All right, that becomes pretty interesting. All right, so it may not be that big of a deal, because also when I learned that stat, and I remember I was up at Taco, I was driving home, I called my wife up, I said, honey, can you pull out all of the water bills for me? I want to take a look at the water bills for the past year. And she says, why? What's the matter? I said, no, I just want to take a look at the numbers, because when the bill shows up, for me anyway on Long Island, when the bill shows up here, what do you end up doing with it? You just pay it, because it's not a large bill. We usually get it about every 4 months or so, and you just pay the bill. It's not a very large bill. So never really paid attention to it. So I said, well, I just want to look at it and see how many gallons of water do I use? Does this family use in a given year? So 12,000 gallons may seem like a big number, may seem like a small number. Does anybody here know, all right, what your average water usage is in gallons per year? All right, I'm just curious. There may be a handful of you out there that may know that number. All right, but what is the average number that you use a year? And I was surprised by it. And what I found for myself and my family, because I was a family of four at the time, was I was right there in the medium. All right, I was right there. So Paul never pays attention to it. All right, 50,000 says Norm. Excellent. All right, it was 120,000 gallons in my house. 120,000 gallons in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, which is the average for a family of four. Now, I probably had an extra jump up there in the middle of the summertime for lawn sprinkling. All right, so, but that's what I found, was then 100,000 is about the average for a family of four. Very interesting. It was very interesting. So, so that's about 10%. So if you were to add recirculation system to your house, that's about 10%. All right, may not be that big of a deal. All right, but it does become big of a deal, because now, all right, my average bill is around $300 for the year. So yeah, if I added recirc, I'd be saving about 30 bucks. All right. However, yes, we're on a septic system here, so I don't have to pay for it leaving my house. You travel 25 miles west of me and start getting closer to New York City and get into the 5 boroughs, well, you pay for water coming in once and you pay for it twice going out of your house. All right, so then all of a sudden it starts to make a big deal. It does start to make a big deal. So anyways, just things to pay attention to. All right, other variables that we're going to see out there when it comes to hot water recirculation and wasting that water. Obviously, the larger the house, the larger the waste is going to be. So when your house gets bigger, you're going to use more and more waste out there. All right, so you go from the smaller house to the much larger home here. All right, but also think about your neighbors. Think about the immediate 10 houses around you. And if you all have the similar size home, all of a sudden we're looking at 120,000 gallons for your first 10 neighbors. That becomes an interesting number, right? And if you want to take it again, now think about your neighborhood. Let's say your neighborhood's around 100 homes. All right, 1.2 million gallons wasted while waiting for hot water. All right. I don't know if we have any builders in here that you're building neighborhoods. Well, this becomes a big deal to you on understanding where you have to put that water and how to get that water away from the home. Sometimes you might be able to build homes at a little closer density because you're eliminating the waste of 1.2 million gallons by adding a hot water recirc system to people's homes. So very, very interesting things to think about out there. So I've been seeing a whole bunch of things moving here on the screen. JB, do we have any questions or comments that we need to add?
Yeah, we got an interesting comment from Matthew Hermanson, who says he consulted with a fellow contractor in Southern California a while back. He installed a new tankless on a recirc system. Lines underground to the master bath. It took 15 minutes for the hot water before the recirc. Now the electric bill went to $1,800 a month. He did the math. Everything was fine because they were busy heating the ground.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got an uninsulated pipe and a slab. Yeah. That's that,
You have a
that,
radiant heating system.
You
Yes.
got a radiant heating system that's actually heating the ground, which is good.
Yeah.
It's a snow melting system, which in Southern California is really not practical. Uh, but that's what you have. And again, this is where control comes into play too, because as you will discuss, controlling a domestic hot water recirc system with a recirc line becomes really, really important. You got Title 24 that requires on demand, so the pump is supposed to run as little as possible. So again, be interesting to see how that system was controlled. But that's kind of where all the flashing's coming from.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Make sure we're not going to do a question and answer period at the end. You got a question immediately, you ask it. All right. And if it's really pertinent to the slide and the words that are coming out of my mouth, JB usually does interrupt me, and he enjoys that well sometimes. Thank you, John. And Rick. Rick's there too. Sorry. Rick's there. Jump in anytime, guys. All right. But of course, then there's just the waiting part. There's the comfort and convenience behind waiting for hot water. All right. And never having to wait for it. I mean, I know a lot of people in here, you travel, you spend any time in a hotel. Lots of hotels have recirc systems. It's always enjoyable to jump into that hotel and have instant hot water that's there if you end up having to wait for it at home. All right. And then there's the hotels that do not have a recirc system. And so I jump into those showers and not paying attention because I'm used to it here at home, as well as some of the hotels on the road. But then there's other hotels where scares the hell out of you in the mornings, right? You just suck up against that wall quickly. So, yes, there's the money side and the savings that you can see from installing a hot water recirc system in there. And then there's the comfort and convenience also of a hot water recirc system. The only thing I don't see I can't find too much of a negative behind hot water recirc systems, other than the few dollars that it does take to install. Okay. And that's about it. And that could be the only negative that's out there. There are lots of negative thoughts behind it, and people are always trying to discount it, saying, oh my goodness, it's going to, it's like leaving a light bulb on in the basement all year round. Well, like we said, we're going to talk about controls and things like that next week, as well as doing the math. So it does not need to cost a lot of money to run a hot water recirc system, as well as making sure you got the right size pump and the power that it's going to take to use that thing. So your best way to add hot water recirculation system is taking a look at this. All right, we were showing you before, you had your T and branch design. Now what we want to do is run a dedicated return line from that furthest fixture, run that return line all the way back, install a circulator on that line. And now we're going to take any of the water that cooled down in this pipe and turn around and drop it back into the water heater to get heated back up again. All right, so this is ideally the best way that you can install a recirc system. All right, we're just going to take that cool water, send it on back to the water heater, all right, and send it back out to the house again, and prime that line and get it ready for whenever somebody pulls off that fixture. Now, I know a lot of people started looking at this and said, oh, no way, can't do it. All right, I can't get to that furthest point, because you see my note here that says it's great for new construction, or if you have a full wide open basement. Well, what if you don't? What if that furthest fixture in the house is on the second floor? That means having to bust open sheetrock and having to run that new line all the way back. I want you to think about this for a second, though, when it comes to recirc. You don't have to hit the furthest fixture. All right. It does not have to originate at that furthest fixture. What if you were to hit this line right here before it goes upstairs to the second floor to catch these fixture groups that are upstairs? Think about how the plumbing is installed, meaning the pipe size. Where is the pipe the largest? Which means what has the largest volume of water? It's back here by the water heater, right? We're going to come off that water heater with that 3/4 or 1-inch pipe. And as we start reaching out further, that's when we get down to, say, 1/2 inch to supply those last couple of fixture groups. And I just have this number from my previous life, all right? 1/2 inch PEX, all right? 1/2 inch PEX, about this much of it, 6.5 feet long, all right? Holds a cup of water. Holds a cup of water. So a cup of water going down the drain is about as much time it takes to turn the faucet on to get your hands underneath it to get wet. That's what went down already. So even double it, make it 12 feet. So if this is where it was and it went upstairs to that second floor of 12 feet or so, we're looking at about 2 cups of water. And now we're going to recirc from here. Recirc this part going around rather than all the way out to the furthest fixture. So just don't kill it because you can't get to the second floor. It can still be done. You can still add a hot water recirc system. So I hope that makes sense out there. Hope that makes sense. All right. So as we move along, all right. So what is this recirc pump supposed to do? All right. Is it supposed to deliver hot water to the fixtures? All right. We'll see more details on this next week, but no, it's not. All right. That's not the design of the circ pump. All right. The circ pump is just there to help move some of that water, keep the pipes primed. All right. We're just trying to keep those pipes primed. We're not looking to pump it out there. All right. The pressure, the pressure coming in from the street or from the well is designed to keep the water in the pipes themselves. All right. All we're doing is just moving that temperature around. All right. We're just going to move that water temperature around. So, and that's where next week in sizing comes into play. We want to watch those maximum velocities out there. Having a big pump installed in a system like this is actually really, really detrimental. Doesn't do anything for us whatsoever. Doesn't do anything for us whatsoever. So, so we want to make sure that we're not over pumping a system out there. So this is going to be in a residential setting and even some commercial and light commercial applications, really small circulators that are needed. So that's the best way I like to look at doing a hot water recirc system. Version 2 is a little bit different. Version 2 is, again, looking at your trunk and branch system like this, but now it is a completely, there is no way we can run any return lines back to the water heater. The house is completely finished. It's a slab on grade home. Nothing has access to it. So let's just not even consider it and get rid of it altogether. Well, that's not what we need. You know, there are ways to add recirc to it. And what we do is what we have is a crossover valve. So we'll have a valve that you can install at the furthest fixture, ideally, put a circulator on the hot water supply. And what we end up doing is using the cold water supply as a return back to the water heater. So your cold water, now we're not putting hot water in the cold line. I want to make sure I get that straight out to everybody. We're not putting hot water in the cold. The water temperature that's in our hot line has reached room temperature. All right, it hasn't been used. The water's gone stagnant and it gave off its heat and it's room temperature, 70 degrees. Well, when we filled up the cold water lines, it was usually around 50, 55 degrees, maybe 60. Now that water has warmed up a little bit to room temperature. Okay, so all we're going to do is take room temperature water from the hot lines and move it across this valve to the room temperature water that's in the cold water line. All right, the room temperature water that was in here is going to get dumped back into the water heater to get reheated back up again, and we're going to move it back out into the hot lines. All right, so we're going from 70 to 120 in our hot lines, and then the cold lines, we're going to go from 70 to 70, and that's it. All right, so that's how we can add hot water as a retrofit application and putting the circulator on the supply line here. Now here we're looking at really, really low flow rates. All right, very, very low flow rates, non-electric device that we're going to do here, and we call this our hot link bypass valve. And this valve is a non-electric device. All right, and what this valve does is it's got a snap disc technology built into it, and we have two pieces of stainless steel that are bonded together that are temperature sensitive. And it's a snap disc, so that means when the water is cold on the hot side, like you see here in the top picture, the disc will snap down to allow some flow to go through. All right, so it's going to take that cold water, bring it through, and once the water gets warm at the snap disc is going to snap up like you see in the bottom picture, and then to stop that flow of water going across to the other side. All right, so that's how this bypass valve is going to work. All right, so it has an internal sensor disc that's doing it, and you can see it right here. all right, on this cutaway. So this is the thermal disc. We do have a check valve built into the crossover valve, so this way you do not have your cold water side bleeding back through onto the hot side itself. So there's only a one-way valve that's going to happen here. And this is a simple addition. Basically, you've got your shutoff valves in the house, all right, that have your flex lines that come up to the fixture. We're going to disconnect from the valve, all right, and we're going to throw it onto the top of the valve here on our crossover valve. And then we're going to add new lines from the valves from the wall into the hot link valve, all right. Hot on the left side, cold on the right-hand side, okay. And this way it eliminates any of that water flow that we don't want to occur. And since we all don't live in Maine, right next to Poland Spring, we made this as a cartridge design, so you can take it apart and clean it. And it does have a screen across the top side of it here to catch any particulate, so this way it doesn't get in stuck open position. And also, if you did need to, the whole thing is stainless steel, so you can use some cleaners on there to to descale it if need be, or replace the cartridge. Replace the cartridge if your water conditions are that hazardous to the device itself. If you notice that you're getting warm water on the cold side, that valve means the disc didn't close. All right, things like that. So if you're getting some weird errant operations of it, then it might be time to change it. And I'd rather undo one thread than undo 4. So leave the whole piece of plastic in place, all right, the housing, and just change that cartridge in order to get that system back up and running again.
We got some comments here coming in, Dave, just some
Yes, sir.
different questions and things like that. There was one came up about using the cold water line. Is Legionella a concern in that cold water line if that water heats up? But as you said, we're shutting the valve off long before the warm water gets into the cold water line. And these aren't, generally speaking, in a residential application, we're using water pretty much all the time anyway. Rick, Rick, what are the temperatures at which Legionella really starts to become an issue? Because if we're talking about 70, 75 degree water in the cold water line anyway, that should not be a problem in terms of Legionella.
Anything above 68 degrees, it can procreate, and but its prime temperatures in and around water heater setting temperatures of around 100 to 120. As we get hotter than that, it starts to diminish a bit, but we don't really completely take care of it till about, well, 140 is like 32 minutes, we kill it all. 160, then we completely sanitize it, sterilize it at that point in time. But that's kind of too hot to ever have really out in the piping system. But again, speaking residentially, and I think we're focused on that. Another, that same Eric was talking about that, you got to understand, and depending on where you're coming from, the cold water, I'll say cold in quotations, coming into houses where their lines aren't buried that deep are relatively warm. I have water, and of course I'm in Mesquite, Nevada, but I have water coming into my home at 95 degrees.
Wow, you need a chiller in your house to get cold water, don't you?
So I don't even use the hot water faucet when I'm just washing my hands or something like that. Until I jump in the shower, I just use whatever's coming in from the street. And there's really nothing we're going to do about Legionella on that. Legionella comes into the structure, into the water heater, and then out into the fixtures. And what we're talking about right now is not really covering Legionella. It's just talking about waiting for domestic hot water. So Legionella is a whole nother subject, and we don't at TACO don't want to pretend we're the experts, but there's a whole bunch of code things going on right now that are going to deal with that, and it's probably going to be a combination of several things based on the people I know that are sitting on those boards.
Right.
Very good. We had a couple of other comments
about the water heater. Right. Exactly. You want to address it at the water heater, not the distribution piping, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a couple of issues, a couple of questions regarding pipe insulation. And listen, pipe insulation, it's good in any instance. I mean, that's one of those things that Insulating your hot water does a couple things. It slows down the cool down, and it helps speed up the heat up. If you think about it, it helps you in both instances. It helps you in hot water delivery because you're not, and speed up the heat up, but I mean you're not losing heat as quickly as when the water goes out to the fixtures, and it stays there. So when you have back to back to back uses, that's only going to help. And we saw if you run uninsulated pipe in a slab, I mean that's just insane. There's
Yeah.
no point to doing that.
Another
And one
point, we want to insulate the water pipes, the hot water pipes, for the same reason as we insulate the water heater. Can you imagine a water heater sitting in a room with no insulation on it?
Yeah.
You go, that's crazy. Well, what do we do when we do domestic hot water circulation or supply? We're taking the energy out of the water heater and putting it now out into the pipe and out into the room. Why the hell would we not insulate that pipe? So
Yeah.
just food for thought.
Yeah,
Interesting.
we
Eh?
insulate a lot of the cold water pipes so we can prevent the condensation and the cold water flowing through in the high humidity areas in the country itself, but we don't do anything with the hot side. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
And then one question just came in from Steve Boslin about any economic numbers comparing the cost of electricity versus the cost of water. Boy, that's going to depend on how you control it. I mean, the if you're looking for, and I think in the big picture, if you're looking for an economic dollars and cents justification for domestic hot water recirculation, I don't think you're going to find it in most instances other than with an on-demand type, because that's where the electrical consumption outweighs not only the water waste, but any extra wear and tear you put on the water heater in terms of fuel usage, because it's going to run for maybe 15-20 seconds at a pop and then shuts off. Anything other than that starts to become more of a balance. So the rationale is not I'm going to save money on water and natural gas or electricity at the water heater, but I still got to pay for it a little bit on the pump. That rationale doesn't exist, because you could set up a system in a silly way, have the pump run all the time, and it's going to cost you a ridiculous amount of money, but that's an insane way to run a recirc pump. So the real value is reducing water waste, and for people who are green and they don't want to waste that resource, you reduce that waste, and most importantly, you simply reduce the weight.
Yep.
I don't want to wait for hot water.
I did the math actually for my brother's house one day. My house is different because I have people that never leave my house. So, but my brother's house, I calculated at about $7.50 a year in electrical consumption. All right, because I did put in the 006 E3 circulator, had it set on about 6 watts of power when it ran. And I had 2 of these hot link valves installed in their house as a retrofit. And I used the smart plug, which we'll talk about next week, in keeping the runtime of that circulator really low. And it was around $7.50 a year. And they were a family of 5. So, but nobody's home all day and nobody's using the water in the middle of the night, right? It was a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the evening, and that was it, as in most people. So, when you stop and think about, having to turn that water heater on and off a couple of times a day, and, making sure it's just maintaining what you need it to do. So, it does do, you are looking at some savings there. I never compared it to the numbers wise and whatnot. I was just, because my brother was under the assumption, oh, the light bulb was going to be on, all weekend, all year round, and an 80-watt circulator. Not at all, right? We're looking at about 6 watts, and a couple of times a day it was turning on. So, excellent questions, everybody out there. Greatly appreciate it.
And we got one last question from Todd Campfuller about recirc and heat pump water heaters. That will be a future presentation, because that's a presentation unto itself.
Yes.
Totally different animal, and the industry is kind of finding its way on that, Todd. And we'll be examining that in a future presentation.
And I see a comment from Tom. He was asking if we have a picture of one of the hot link valves installed. I don't have one in this presentation. Unfortunately, I have some in some other ones, and I did not include it in here. So, but I believe we've got some.
We have an artist rendition on the screen right now.
Well, no, he's looking for one installed, how it looks underneath the sink. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, of course, what we look at here, the drawings of it makes it nice and clean. But yeah, I have a couple of the braided hoses underneath my sink, and but it's up nice and high. And the other thing that's nice with this hot link valve is has these 2 screw holes, all right, that you can mount it to the back of your vanity there, all right, to get it out of the way. So, and I did see another question pop up. Are you going to cover controls? Yes, next week. Next week we will be covering controls. So. It is next week, right? Next week.
I believe it is.
Right. Well, the next Takeo Tuesday class is going over sizing and controls. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. So what about tankless? All right. So right now, I've talked about everything being on a tank style design. All right. Well, the hot link valve, that crossover valve is not designed for tankless. All right. It is designed for a tank style water heater. If you were to put it on tankless, all right, the challenge that you get is that the valve is only allowing about 0.33 gallons a minute through it. All right, doesn't allow a very high flow rate to it. And I don't care what size circulator you put on there. The problem that you have is that most of your tankless water heaters are looking for about a half a gallon a minute to go across that heat exchanger in order for it to fire. And if you give it a little bit of flow, like through that hot link valve, the water heater may turn on and say, oh, never mind. Oh, never mind. Oh, never mind. And you get this little bit of sandwiching that's going to happen in the pipe itself. So all of a sudden you feel this hot and cold coming out of the fixtures. So you don't really want to use your crossovers for your tankless units unless you have either a tankless unit that can fire on a low flow rate, less than a half a gallon a minute, or a crossover valve that goes over a half a gallon a minute. And I don't think there's anything out there that's just going to do that just yet. So now if you were to use the dedicated return line, you can go tank or tankless. All right. And we'll show you the sizing for that. That crossover valve, we're looking at tank style water heater, whether it's an indirect tank or a standalone fired water heater itself. Okay. But now let's talk about tankless and how we can do recirc. And we have a system out there that we call the Takeo Genie. Now the Takeo Genie, instead of the valve going underneath the sink, for the retrofit application, we are going to put a circulator underneath that sink. All right. And the beauty of this system here is this system is totally different in operation, as in it runs only on command, meaning when does the homeowner want hot water, and the homeowner activates the device. All right. And it's activated by a couple of ways. If you're walking into the bathroom, there's going to be a high assumption that you're going to want hot water right about now. All right. So the way it turns on is either by a push button, all right, that we can install near the sink itself, or by a motion sensor, which means you walk into the room, hey, we're going to want to turn on. All right. And then the pump will turn on. Now, this pump, as John was talking, or this system, as John was saying before, is our greenest system that we have, as in it uses the least amount of electricity, because the design of this circulator is to run for between 15 and 45 seconds. That's it. It does not run a very long time. It is a much larger circulator because our tankless units, we want to have that high flow rate to go across there. But here, we are looking to do some fast and furious pumping and get the water up to the fixture as fast as possible and then shut off. Okay. So we're going to mount this underneath the sink. As you can see here, it could be done back at the water heater as a dedicated return line as well. All right. And we can use the Genie controls in order to do that. But the most common that we see is using it in the crossover function, where we're using the cold water supply as the return going back. All right. So, and like I said, we can use these with our tankless units because we are looking at much larger circulators like our 008s and 0011s, depending upon the size of water heater that you're using. So when we take a look at the piping here, you can see that circulator being installed at the furthest fixture, ideally, if we can. in your trunk and branch design system, and using the cold water as the supply going back. Now, there's a couple of things to understand with this system and how it keeps the pump at its absolute minimum volume runtime. So one, there's a temperature sensor built into the Genie. All right, and what that temperature sensor is doing is not looking for temperature, but what it looks at is temperature on when it was turned on. All right, so what it does right here, all right, when that motion sensor or the button gets clicked on, the first thing the circulator does is look at the temperature right here at the supply of the circulator. And if it's below 99 degrees, it's going to record it and say, okay, here is my starting point. All right, if nobody has used any water in this house, as we know, we're going to see 70 degrees on the hot and we're going to see 70 degrees on the cool. Let's say it is 70 degrees when it kicks in. All right, because I want to make sure the math is nice and easy for everybody. What this is doing is looking for an 8-degree rise. All right, and then it's going to shut off. All right, so if it was 70 degrees when this pump was activated right here, it is now looking for an 8-degree rise, which means it's going to shut off when it sees at the supply side of the circulator 78 degrees. When it's 78 degrees, what's behind the 78 degrees? Yes, the 120 or whatever your water heater is doing is going to be immediately right behind it. Shut the pump off. Don't make that pump run any longer. We've got the hot water right there at the faucet. It doesn't have to be at the circulator, and it doesn't have to be all the way back at the return line, all right, on a dedicated return system if you had that installed. We just want to make sure that we've got hot water sitting right there at the faucet, and that's what it's going to do. So it took that 70-degree water that was in the hot water supply, crossed it over, brought it to the cold water supply, and now we keep that pump running for maybe 15 to maybe 40 seconds or so, depending upon that length of run and the size of the pipe that you have there. All right, so that keeps this pump runtime really low. The other thing that happens here with this circulator is that the motion sensor, if it was activated by motion sensor, there's a 4-minute lockout, meaning if you were to walk into the bathroom and the pump turns on and it runs and it shuts off, and you leave the bathroom and you come back in again, you already have that 4-minute lockout occurred. It's going to keep the circulator off. And then the third thing that's going to keep that circulator off is if the temperature on the supply side is below 99 degrees, all right, or above 99. It's saying, all right, we don't need to run. The pipe is charged already. So that's going to keep the pump off at longer periods of time. So we're looking to move it quickly and keep it off. And the beauty of the system too is that, yes, you'll have one circulator installed and you can have multiple motion sensors and starter buttons installed throughout the entire house. All right, now these are a hardwired sensor. All right, so that's why it's great for some new construction. And you can put multiple sensors in. So no matter which bathroom turns on, you can charge the entire house. All right, just doesn't have to be that furthest fixture. So I usually look at adding motion sensors to your critical areas of the house. All right, and what are your critical areas? All right, usually the homeowner's bathroom or the kitchen space. All right, and you can have a combination of the two. You can do the motion sensor in the bathroom and you can do the button switch in the kitchen, which I suggest because a lot of times we spend many hours in the kitchen without using hot water. So when you want that water, then you hit the button rather than the motion sensor kicking it off. So you can add those different as you go through the house itself. Sound good?
It's all good.
All good out there, JB? All right.
It's all good.
Oh, one question just popped in.
Okay, do we have to install the pump at the farthest fixture or can it be installed close to the water heater? Again, I think that's going to depend on your plumbing setup, Ahmad. If you have if you don't have a dedicated recirc line, then you want it at that fixture where it's most important. If you do have a dedicated recirc line, yeah, put it back in the mechanical room right next to the water heater. That's fine.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, the pump can be back down at the water heater itself. Exactly right. So if you had that dedicated return line, so just imagine teeing off right here, running it back over to the water heater, you can put the pump here too and run the wires out to the house itself. So it does not have to be done as a crossover design. This is by the most common that we use, that we sell of this product, in the crossover application, but it can be done with a dedicated return line. Yes. Excellent. Thank you about that question.
And we got another question about a programmable timer for control on the Genie, which I'll say, Tom, it defeats the purpose of the Genie. We have circulators with programmable controls. The point of the Genie with a tankless specifically is that we don't want it running when no one's using hot water, because we don't want to kill the tankless, right? And that's just the point of the Genie. It's a Title 24 compliant device that will only run when a hot water use is imminent. So
Right.
a timer doesn't necessarily work in that application. If you wanted to go with a timer, we have lots of other alternatives for that. That's not the Genie.
Right. At that point, yeah, you wouldn't use the Genie. You would just use the pump by itself. Right. Because the Genie is the circulator with the controls all built into it. Yes.
Right.
So if you were looking for just a timer and a larger circulator, like we showed earlier, like my first application, correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. So awesome. All righty.
Yeah, and Eric Niehaus says Watts has a valve that does work on a tankless, but you do get warm water into the cold water fixture line. Yeah, there are under sink valves that are very slow acting and not very long lasting that do have a little bit higher flow rates that could be used with the tankless, but they tend to the problem
look at the pros and cons on both sides of it. I've listened to a lot of people that have had those crossover valve systems installed, and they say, "Oh, it's awesome! I got all the hot water in the world." And then in the same breath, they say, "It sucks because I don't have any cold water anymore."
Right.
So I'm still dumping water down the drain because they wanted that cooler water, because
It's like
a lot of lead by that happens.
It's like the old Three Stooges line: "You want hot water? Turn on anything, you'll get it."
Yeah. So there's a lot of recirculation systems out there. You just want to make sure you get the right one for the right application, and also what the expectations are in the home too, right? So and it's very easy to do it well too. All right. It's also very easy to do it incorrectly. All right. And we see a lot of bad systems, as we'll go through next week. We'll see in what oversizing can do to this too as well.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point there, Dave, regarding customer expectation. Just to give you a preview of what we're going to talk about next week, is I think there are three types of customers for domestic hot water recirculation. There's the people who don't really care how much it costs to operate the circulator. They don't care how much extra natural gas it uses. They just want instant hot water at every faucet in the house, anytime, day or night. Okay. Control wise, that's an easy solution. Plug in the pump, let it run 24/7, and hope the heck it's not oversized, because you'll also have a sprinkler system fairly soon.
Right.
On the other end of the spectrum, you have people who simply want to comply with code and want the cheapest thing possible. It's kind of the same solution, right? Just plug in the pump and let it run, because they don't care how much it costs or anything else. They just want the cheapest installed solution. The big sweet spot's the folks in the middle. They either want to not waste water or not waste time, and that's the big fat part of the bell curve of customers. And there, it just depends on what they are in fact looking for, and we have multiple solutions for that. But as Dave said, get find out what your customers' expectations are, so you make sure you meet them.
And actually, most of them don't even know about hot water recirc.
Good
they
point.
Don't even know this animal is out there. It's just something that they live with. So it's interesting. When I first started working for Taco, and and traveling on the road and wearing shirts that have my company name on it, and I'd come home, and my wife years ago, she was involved. If she was involved with it, it was she was in it big time. Meaning the PTA here at home, Girl Scouts, class mom, you name it, she was involved. She volunteered quite a bit around town, and because we had just moved to this town, so she wanted to be involved and meet a lot of people as much as possible. So, but then I come home from a trip and I'm wearing the Taco shirt, and they look at it, and whoever's sitting at the kitchen table kind of looks at it quizzically and says, "Hey, it doesn't say Taco Bell." So all right, we're gonna ask, what do you do, right? And so a lot of times I would bring up, based upon the audience in the room, I would bring up talking about domestic hot water recirculation systems. rather than jumping into the heating world. I said heating and plumbing, and oh, okay. And I would say, and I start going on with it, and I start talking about domestic hot water recirculation. All right. And so most of the people sitting at the kitchen table, oh my good, that sounds awesome. Oh, this is great. Oh, I didn't even know this was out there. And then the next question always, it was almost inevitable. The next question was, how much? Right. And so when I would say this and tell them the price, I said, well, I don't know. It depends upon your house. It depends upon your expectations, as we were talking about. But, you know, and I'm just going to throw out a wild, you know, crazy number right now, anywhere between $500 to $1,000 installed. I don't know what you have at home, so I just need to give you some wide range of numbers that are out there. All right. And you're going to have to talk to a contractor about that. And guess what they said after that? That's it. That's most of the time I got that answer. That's it. They were surprised by it, that it was that easy that they can get a hot water recirc system installed for that price. They thought they were going to have to get all new water heaters and stuff like that because they don't know. And nobody ever presented it to them either. So, but they also didn't know that there's an option for it. Now, I remember we did a This Old House episode with Takeo Genie on it many, many years ago. And because This Old House has been on TV for what, 35, 40 years now, it takes a while for the reruns to come back up again. And every time this episode shows, all of a sudden we start getting a few more phone calls because people say, oh my God, that's my house. There's a fix for that? So very interesting. All you need to do is present it with your customers. Do not become their financial advisor, all right, before you walk in the door. Just remember.
Yeah, I've been on the TV show Designing Spaces a couple of times,
Okay.
talking about domestic hot water recirculation in both instances. And we usually same thing when those repeats come up. I'll get a phone call from somebody asking about domestic hot water recirculation. And I remember one person asked me. She made sure to tell me she was a lawyer, which I don't know why that mattered, but she was a lawyer. But that she was. Why would I do this instead of just getting one of those instantaneous water heaters? And I said, well, the instantaneous water heater is going to be in the same location as your tank type water heater. We still got to get the hot water from there to your faucet, there to your shower. I mean, just because it makes the hot water instantly doesn't mean it magically flies to your fixture. So
right.
It's not one or the other. It's kind of.
And as you've noticed, we've changed the name of instantaneous water heaters to tankless water heaters.
Yes, that's a very important shift in our industry.
That's right. That's right. Yep. All righty. So let's click on. My next slide is to say thank you, everybody. All right. So this was a great class. Thanks to John and Rick hanging out and everybody that came online with us today for Takeo Tuesday. I did finish within the hour. Holy crow.
Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
I finished under the hour, JB, too.
That's a shocker. That's a shocker that's a shocker right there for you. It doesn't usually happen. I don't know. You say I'm long-winded.
I know.
So the next session is going to be on designing and controlling residential DHW systems. So that'll be Rick and I handling that one. And we said it was next week. It's 2 weeks from now, March 12th.
Oh,
March
2 weeks,
12th.
yes. Not next week.
That'll be in 2 weeks, and you can sign up for that on takeocomfort.com. Go to our website, then hit the training tab, go to Takeo Tuesdays and register for that. We'd love to have you back.
Yep. And for next tomorrow, you'll get the link.
Oh, you will get the link tomorrow. All right. Message done on time because you held the mayo. Oh, you card you. Okay, so great. Looking forward to the next section. Excellent. All right, good. Really appreciate the class. Looking forward to the next one. Awesome. Okay, thank you, folks. We really appreciate you being with us and spending your Tuesday lunchtime or Tuesday after breakfast time, or wherever the heck you are in the world. I'm sure we've had people from all over the world on these things on different occasions, which has really been kind of cool. So wherever you guys are, thank you for being with us. Look out for that email tomorrow, and we'll see you on March 12th.
March 12th, yes. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one. Enjoy.
See ya.